Hey, what's up, everybody? Hey, we're live. We're live, Nikki. Hey, everybody. Hey, my name is Amy, and welcome to our very first ever live webcast for All in Recovery. Woo woo! So it is my desire to, hey, we're starting something big here, right? Start small. So each week we're going to bring you different topics related to recovery, regardless of where you are in the recovery world, what side of the fence you're on, however you're affected or been affected. Hopefully, we will have content each week that'll reach you. And I am excited. Nikki's in the house. So I'm excited to bring Nikki here in tonight. Man, when I decided that we were going to do this and we got to scheduling people, she had to be numero uno. Like she had to be number one. So my sis here, she's got quite a story. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself, Nikki, and then we'll kind of jump into what your story's about and get on topic, okay?
All right. Sounds good. My name's Nikki, Nikki Sarter, Nicole Sarter for others. Like professionally, I go by Nicole. I don't even know why I do that. Nobody calls me Nicole, but I still do it. My story, my clean date is September 1st of 2018. I was originally, my DOC was opiates. I fell right into the opiate epidemic. When I had my children, my twins, my hips didn't go in and out right. And so in doing that, I ended up getting introduced to a pain clinic because I couldn't walk. And when I did that, I fell right into the pain medicine. And so by that, my story progresses obviously into plenty of other things. But it did start out with opiates. And I think that a lot of people right now are seeing that trend, that people are starting out with that. But I eventually did end up in prison for possession of controlled substance in Texas. I am originally from Kentucky, but Texarkana, Texas got me. And I'm so grateful that they did. So grateful. My life has completely changed for so much of the better because of it. I am so grateful for my time of correction there. I just can't even explain it all.
That's awesome. I've got the opportunity to hear your testimony before, and man, it's awesome. So, but now, so tonight, what we're talking about is you've kind of got an ideal story for this topic, and so you. Everybody's getting ready to find out why you're my superhero, right? But just like myself, we've had in-depth discussions about the catalyst in our addiction.
Yeah.
That point where bottom was just ripped out from under us, right?
Absolutely.
And you, just like me, that time was when we lost custody of our children, right?
Absolutely.
Addiction robs us from everything, and it robbed me from my parental rights, and it did you as well.
Absolutely.
So, why don't you walk us through what that looked like for you?
Okay. Well, it really started, like I was talking about the pain clinics, right? Well, my ex-husband, we had gotten divorced. I had gained custodial parent of our children at the time of divorce. Now, I was on opiates at that time. Later on, my ex-husband comes back and goes after custody of our children with the basis that I am on pain medication daily. And so in that, the judge in that case in Simpson County, Kentucky, decided that it was in the best interest of the children that they live with their father. Okay, so even though my records reflected that I was in pain management for a medical issue and that I was taking them appropriately, that it was not in the best interest of my children because my ex-husband did not have these medical issues that could hinder one parent or the other from parenting the children, right? Well, when that happened, I lost all identity. I was so thickly codependent on my children for my identity because I'd been a mom my whole adult life. And then now they're sitting here telling me, no, no, you can't do that anymore. And I'm not going to really throw shade, that it could have been handled a little bit differently by my ex-husband or whatnot. It could have. I think that was before you started seeing some stigma barriers being broken. And so there was very much a stigma behind that at that time because this was in 2016. So there's been a lot of progress in the past 5 years in that area. And that happened, I just spiraled out. I did end up going into treatment, a 30-day treatment. I got off the opiates. But after about 3.5 months of being clean off the opiates, I couldn't hack it. I didn't know what it is. I hadn't addressed the mental part of it, really. I'd just taken the drugs out of the equation, but there was still my whole codependent nature on my children, and they weren't there. And so when that happened, and I'm starting to really, really, really build up, I was dry. I wasn't sober. I wasn't working a program, really. I was just not on drugs and mad all the time. And when that happened, I spiraled out, and I ended up moving into meth at that point. Because meth got out of in my head, meth got out of my system quicker, and in these kind of things. But that is where my spiral started. And without having that tether of taking care of my children every day, and I literally, when I left Kentucky, I had to call somebody and say, "Hey, we've got a PTO meeting in 2 days, and I'm not gonna be president anymore." I just spiraled out, and I just threw my hands up, and I gave up, and I said, if I can't be a full-time mom every day, then I just don't know how to be a mom, and I'm just going to go get high about it and stay high about it in some other state. And that's the gist of it. I mean, that's really the gist of it. And, looking back on it now, I can sit and try to rationalize and justify it. That's not necessarily the best thing to do. I can see where my brain was at the time. And then again, I can't, but then again, I can't right now because I'm not high. You know what I mean? I was high.
Right. Yeah. Well, so, you went on to, so did you lose? I can't remember. You're going to have to remind me. So was custody lost prior to your incarceration?
Yes. Okay. Custody was lost prior to my incarceration, which is kind of what made me spiral out, because I was holding it together, even being physically dependent and somewhat mentally dependent on the opiates. I was still being an effective mom. You know what I mean? I was still that pro-social individual, paying her bills, working, doing what she needed to do. I was just having to be in a pain clinic. And so when my children were removed from my custody due to that, it caused me to lose my mind. I quit my job. I just sat in the chair for a couple of months, didn't move. And so when I spiraled out, all of a sudden, I got this inkling that I needed to run. And so I had the opportunity to run to Arkansas, of course, with a man.
Always a man.
Always a man in there, because I was needing that codependent nature at the time. You know what I mean? I needed somebody there to tell me I'm a good human because my kids weren't there to do it, in my head.
Right.
And so I end up in Arkansas and then down in Texas. And now once I got to Texas, I was still in the madness, very much so. I got involved with some very scary people. And I started living a lifestyle that I'd never lived. I was not raised in that hustle lifestyle. My parents are very pro-social people. I'm the only person in my family that has had active addiction of any kind. And so it was a lifestyle that I wasn't used to. But once I got in it, I was sucked into it. I was smart, had a good logistics brain. I was really good at money, due to my jobs 20 years before I became an addict. And I was good at those things. So I was an asset to the wrong people. Now, that being said, I ended up getting picked up on possession of controlled substance for under 240 methamphetamine in Texarkana. That was actually in April of 2018. Now, my clean date's September, right? So the reason that is they picked me up due to a clerical error. Yeah, clerical error. It ended up being possession over 1 under 4, and they offered me 10 years probation. So when they did that, my ultimate goal, once my brain was cleared up, was I need to get home to my kids. I need to get home to my kids. And so I started trying to do an interstate compact with Texas on probation for them to transfer my probation back to Kentucky where my family is, right?
So when
They
you
wouldn't do
say
it.
interstate compact, you mean just kind of explain to me exactly what that is.
It's like it's where I am on probation in Texas, but Kentucky is supervising it.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so it's kind of like being on probation or parole in 2 different states at once.
Gotcha.
But the problem is Texas, their probation is so hard. I mean, it's way harder than parole ever could be. Kentucky will not accept it, or Texas will not accept Kentucky accepting it because the stipulations are way different. And so they were not going to let me come home for 10 years. I have no family in Kentucky or Texas. I have no people in Texas. The only people I did have were absolutely the wrong people to have. And so I asked them, I said, well, can you violate me and send me to prison? And they kind of looked at me funny, like, who does that? You're free. Why do you want to go get locked up? Because I want to go home. My kids need me. I want to go home. And they wouldn't violate me, which is where the difference in my clean time comes in. So I asked them, I said, what do I need to do to get violated? And they said, well, you would have to come in high. And I said, well, okay, see you Tuesday. So I came in high to probation, and they ended up charging me with probation violation. So, and it sent me to prison. Now I joke about that now, but it was very serious then because I really was trying to make a difference in my life. But I knew that I couldn't stay healthy 10 years in Texas away from my children. So they violated me and sent me up to prison. I ended up doing a total of 18 months on a 3-year sentence and was released December 30th of 2019. So all of that being said, before I kind of spiraled out, I had petitioned the court for what's called a guardian ad litem for my kids. There's 2 different terms. It's a guardian ad litem or a friend of the court. What that does is when you petition the court in a custody case or any kind of dispute case like that regarding children, is it allows the court to give the children their own attorney. So you have, the petitioner, which is either the father or the mother or the grandparent, and then you have the respondent, which is the father or the mother or the grandparent. And then this puts a third attorney in there that is specifically after the best interest of the kids. Best decision I've ever done in my entire life. I don't even know why I really did it at the time. I don't remember because I was, on opiates. Best thing I've ever done in my life. And they did give the kids one at that time. Now, while I was incarcerated, I had petitioned the court and told them that I would be released on December 30th and that I wanted my parents to be able to take my, not rights, but my timeshare with the children. Because while I was incarcerated, my ex-husband would not allow my parents or anybody in my family to see my kids, which leads into parental alienation. I had called my children every week. I had sent multiple letters over multiple months. And when I say multiple, I mean a couple of times a week I had written my kids. Eventually, about 6 months before I was released, I started sending the letters. And of course, I'm making contraband necklaces in prison and anything that you can, I had a friend in the property room and they would send it out for me. And so by the time the guardian ad litem was receiving all of these things from me for my children, and she had this big box in the corner of her office, all of my kids' stuff. And so she had to petition the court in order for my ex-husband to allow her to come meet with her so that she could give these to my children, because at that time my children just thought mom disappeared because they done something wrong. And there's a big sticky situation a lot of parents get into of, do I allow my children contact or be in contact with the incarcerated parent? I see both sides of that coin. uh, Depending on the active role of the parent before incarceration, I think that's a big determining factor there. If the parent is really active during incarceration, I think it is important to keep that contact in some way, not necessarily taking them up there and having to look through them a glass, but phone calls, letters, stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that they do in prisons now that, where you can read a book and the audio, and then send the book and the audio to the child. I love that. I love the people that came in and did that. And so I think those things are really important because it does keep that tether there of the child not thinking that the other parent just fell off the face of the earth,
Right.
But then again, I think the calls need to be kind of monitored. I think there needs to be a mutual respect in that role. But while I was gone, my ex-husband did not allow me access at all to my kids, did not give them any of my letters that I was sending over and over and over again. But he didn't before I was incarcerated either. I called several times a month and he wouldn't then either. So, but going forward from that, on December 23rd of 2019, my children received all of the letters that I'd been sending for months and months and months and months. These little crocheted purses, these little crosses that I'd made out of stuff I'd bought off commissary, little rings I'd made them and sent out, and paintings I'd done, all this artwork that I had learned to do while I was in there that I'd sent them. And they were given that on December 23rd after the December 19th court date, where my ex-husband was advised that I was coming home on December 30th. And this is all in 2019. So going forward from that, the court was aware that I was coming home. They had went ahead and ordered my ex-husband to begin reunification therapy for my children, so that me being integrated back into their, situation, their life, could be done on a therapeutic level. A lot of people would be a little frustrated by that. I wasn't. I wasn't at all. I absolutely am an advocate for reunification therapy with the right therapist. The therapist that I had, she's in Bowling Green, Kentucky with Angel Arms Counseling. She was wonderful. Her name's Susan Barnett. She handled it in such a way that it was non-judgmental toward me, and it was all focused around the child and went at the child's pace. And so a lot of that, when we're coming out of prison or out of a long treatment situation, where we're in long-term treatment or whatever, we're kind of off balance,
Right.
Sam's Club was a whole situation for me. I kind of freaked out a little bit when I went to Sam's Club, but she reintegrated and she looked at the pace that I kind of needed, and she looked at the pace that my kids kind of needed. And she absolutely took into account my ex-husband's wishes, because he had been the one caring for the kids for the past 2 years while I'm higher locked up,
Right.
And so I am a huge advocate for reunification therapy, especially if when choosing one, a couple of tidbits. All right. So you definitely want a therapist that has a social work background if you can get it. Reason I say that is because they know what the courts kind of want to see, when you're reunifying a family. Two, someone that is not judgmental or have a stigma toward addiction or, a past incarceration or anything like that. And you won't know until you really sit down and talk to them. Somebody that can do child therapy and adult therapy. One thing that I think was a really big component in our therapist being able to do this effectively was she was able to be my therapist and my children's therapist and the reunification therapist slash somewhat co-parenting therapist in the mix of that. Because obviously my ex-husband and I had a whole lot of issue when I come home because I've been trying to contact my kids, you know.
Yeah.
So we had some stuff that we still are working through. You know, this was 14 months ago, and we still have to really watch how we word stuff with each other and stuff like that, just out of common respect and learning new communication styles.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing with the therapist that you choose, I would absolutely try to find an office that also has other services. All right. So like with the therapist Angel Arms, all right, she's got her as a reunification therapist, a child therapist, my therapist. They also have a reentry program. So if you can find an office that has a reunification therapy, a reentry type program, which is where they help you get settled with a job that accepts felons. That was a big situation when I got out. I was thinking that I was going to have to go and make $9 an hour and never find a decent job again because I'm a whole felon now. That was not the case. I was able to find, you know, adequate work at a decent pay, and, you know, make a difference in my financial stability pretty much right out the gate. But I had to have that positive support to help me guide me in that area. So a reentry program is really good. Not only that, but housing. So they've got targeted case management that help you find housing. They help you with any kind of navigating government assistance because, you know, when you're coming out, you know, uh, health insurance, you know, that's a whole situation. At least I thought it was going to be. It wasn't. I just had to go fill out a form. I thought I had built it up in my head that I was going to have all these horrible things I was going to have to go through, and it really wasn't that bad, you know?
Right.
So we've got work, housing, transportation, you know, helping you find some transportation avenues and those kind of things. And so you get these bubble of supports around you in the same office. A lot of offices have APSS. I highly suggest finding an office with an APSS. That's actually what I do for the office that I work for. And it's adult peer support specialist. I work with people that not only are, you know, have been incarcerated, but substance abuse and then also mental health. People that necessarily aren't, you know, substance abuse or incarceration, but just mental health. And it's just an added support. It's another phone call. It's another person with a brain and ideas to kind of throw stuff at you and give you an idea. Well, maybe I should try this, or maybe I should try that. And so when you take all of these supports in a therapist office, all right, so we've talked about, and just stop me if I'm rattling, but we've talked about the therapist office and what an asset that is, okay? Because every time you meet with these people, they are building the things you need to do and helping you build the things you need to do to get stable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you've got your guardian ad litem or your friend of the court, which is looking at the best interest standards legally of the kids. And even though they're going to be everybody's going to be telling you what you need to be doing all the time. And yes, it does get frustrating. It you know, kind of like when you go into recovery and you've got a sponsor and 8 ladies trying to tell you that you don't need to do this and you need to do that. And you're like, look, I wish somebody just stopped telling me what to do. Yes. But these people that you place in your life, if you take these suggestions and look out for the best interest of the kids only, it will absolutely change the landscape. It did for me. You know, the biggest part of coming out of prison for me was not having the idea of a mom. One thing that caused me to spiral was I had this rigid view of what a mom looks like, right? I had to be PTA president. I had to coach my kids' stuff. They had to wear hair bows in their hair to every cool school function. They had to have dresses every day for church. I had this idea of what my mom's skills were supposed to be. My house had to stay spotless. My car, I had to drive a minivan. All of these things, really. And when I come out of prison, I had to really think about that. I'm not your average mom anymore. I'm not this what I stereotypical soccer mom anymore. And so I had to really evaluate what my role was in my children's life, because I came out of prison and I had no rights, basically none. My visitation had been suspended with all of my kids. I still had joint custody of the girls, but I also have another ex-husband with a 14-year-old son, and then I have a 21-year-old son also. Well, my relationship with my 14-year-old, I'd had communication with him while I was locked up. So there was, even though it was very much strained and there was a lot of, I don't know about you yet from him, there was still that consistent. He knew where I'd been. He knew that he hadn't done anything wrong. And his dad and I were communicating really well. While I was incarcerated, given over sole custody to his dad because he couldn't take him out of the country for vacation without having me sign something, and getting something through TDCJ was an act of Congress, right? So I'd done that because I trust him explicitly with our son. I mean, explicitly. I trust his decisions. He provides well for him. He is a wonderful father. And so I trust his decision making. Well, that's not necessarily the case in the other area. Not saying anything negative toward him. The girl's dad and I are not on that same trust level, right?
Right.
And part of it was due to the breakdown of not being able to talk to my kids and some of the other past hurts that had went on. And so when I come out of prison, I had to really look at my motives. I had to check those real thick, because when we come out of prison, if we're holding on to these past hurts and habits of, a divorce or somebody that's wronged us or something like that, it's kind of easy to use your kids as an excuse of, I'm their mama, just to get back at him, right?
Right.
You can't do that, friend. Like, you can't. As much as you want to,
I may or may not have walked through that whole mentality that season myself. I'm guilty.
It's serious. It's so easy, but I'll tell you so I get out December 30th. Well, there was already a court date set up for January 10th. So on January 2nd, I'm out serving my own subpoenas to the sheriff's department of Simpson County. I walked in to the sheriff and I handed him his subpoena. Mind you, I'm Googling how to do all of this, Googling it. And so I'm not even sure I'm doing it right at this point. And I walk in and I hand him his subpoena and he looks at me kind of cross-eyed. And he goes, I don't think I've ever been served by a civilian before. And I said, well, sir, and I'm not going to say his name. I said, well, sir, I'm not going to pay you $70 to serve yourself a subpoena.
Hey, that's smart right there.
Well, when you come out of prison with $50,
So while I'm going to back up just a minute. So while you're in prison, you hired a friend of the court. Pretty much an attorney for your child to represent your child's best interest.
Right. And you can petition the court for that and not have to pay for it right out the gate.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So then, and you said that was number one, the best decision you made.
Best.
So if you had to give any advice based on your own experience, that would be a necessary support in just about any
Absolutely.
situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, because and they will help you navigate through the best interest part of it. A lot of times they're kind of like an investigator for the court. So a friend of the court can actually go and speak with the kids' teachers. They can request medical records on the children. They can actually request medical records on both parents. They can kind of do and this is not legally sound, but kind of like a custodial, they can look at both sides and see what the family dynamic is. And it really helps the court to weed through some of the legality to get to the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
Now, the kicker behind that is that you have to be doing the right things, because if not, then that, guardian ad litem is not going to be on your side. Right. You have to be doing the right things. I asked her, I sent her a letter while I was incarcerated, and I said, what do you need from me? So when I come out, that I can get my children. Now, the time I sent her that letter, they had just passed a shared parenting law. And that shared parenting law is actually KRS 403.340 in the state of Kentucky. Now, this is Kentucky specific. And what that states is that unless there are extenuating circumstances on one side or the other, that equal time sharing is to be between both parents. So it's a very social law and it was done in July of 2018. It's just now starting to really filter into the court systems. And so what that states is that the mom and the dad are supposed to get 50-50 timeshare, right? And that unless there's an extenuating circumstance on either side, now I will say, addiction or incarceration can be looked at as an extenuating circumstance depending on the charge. Of course, it goes with length of time that you're incarcerated, and it also kind of goes to the judge of whether they still hold a stigma about substance use. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of a gray area there. So when I sent her this letter, I knew about this law. It was a very new law at that time. She responded and she told me that I would need adequate housing, which I was very fortunate. My parents are adequate housing, and they have been so gracious to let us take over their house, basically, until we could buy something. And then adequate employment, which I've never had a problem with. Adequate transportation to make sure I can get my kids where they need to be. One thing she said was stay away from men, and it wasn't like, it wasn't a jab in any way. It was, and I'm so grateful that she put it in there, but it was a stay focused. And because, for some women, the old me included, sometimes a man would break my focus from what mattered most to me. Right. And she knew that could be a possibility. And so I was grateful that she put that in there. But she gave me these little tidbits of, what she hopes to, get involved in my recovery, which I did right out the gate. The next day after I got home and slept for about 16 hours in a real bed, I got up and I went to an AA meeting. I went every other day after that. And eventually, about 40 days out of being out of prison, went to work in the recovery field. And so I've done everything that guardian ad litem has asked of me, and then some. And it has boded so well for me. It's helped guide me in so many ways. And even though she is not my attorney, or she has to be really careful about how she talks to me, because she can't give me legal advice at all. Right. It wouldn't be appropriate, and she hasn't. But she has given me the examples of what DCBS would expect of me. She knows, like, I've given her full reign to my parole officer. Anytime she wants a drug test, I'll bring the test with me. I'll pay for it, whatever you need me to do. I've given her free reign to my employment records. I gave her free reign to my mental health records. I gave her free reign to my life as full transparency. And so now she knows that I am living my life with integrity, and that's always in the best interest of our children.
Right.
So,
Right. So that was very instrumental in setting
yes,
your goals or your
absolutely,
requirements, what's required of you. So,
absolutely.
all right. So now you've hired this person's in place, this support's
Mhm.
in place, and now you've got all these things that you know that you must get done in order to even proceed to get custody back. Right, right. So
Yes.
let's talk about. I think it's a real good time to shameless plug. Let's talk about APSS and how they were fundamental in helping you find those supports as far as transportation and where you're going to work and where can I get
Yeah.
meetings at and what program's the best for me. And, so I'm assuming a peer support specialist
Mhm.
probably helped you in a lot of ways during that.
Well, so I had my therapist, right, which was
Mhm.
doing like the reunification, and my therapist, which kind of kept me sane when I was trying to figure all this out. And then of course the children saw the same therapist. I had what is called a targeted case manager, because that office didn't have an APSS at the time.
Okay.
But the targeted case manager was very much in the role of kind of an APSS and targeted case management. Now,
So is
and
that
so
a
that
licensed therapist?
they are it's a secondary accreditation. It's targeted case management. So it's more like resource management. And
Gotcha.
so, kind of how we, as APSSs, we find resources all the time for recovery, for treatments. I help with finding jobs and stuff like that. A targeted case manager is specifically for living resources. So,
Gotcha.
like jobs and housing, food resources, insurance, helping them get transportation to and from where they need to be, stuff like that. Now, as far as the APSS role, which I do feel like is an integral part of the reentry situation, if I could have had an APSS doing that, man, it would have made life so much easier, because I would have been able to talk to somebody that had been there.
Right.
I would have been able to be like, why is Sam's Club so scary? It freaked me out. There were so many places for people to hide, and like there's like these buzzy things coming out of like weird holes in the ceiling. I don't know. It was like I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone.
Well, the targeted case management. So let's, you said you were very blessed when you come out of prison because you had a place to go. But let's
Mhm.
talk about it. Like most people, when they go in, if addiction's not robbed them of everything already, by the time they get out, it's gone.
Well, and let's just face it. When we're in addiction, our relationships with our family is not our first priority.
Right,
You
right.
know,
And
so and it's hard, man. It's hard to find adequate housing for people that have felony backgrounds. It's just, and then right now, I don't know how the whole housing situation has gotten out of control to begin with. But not even with the felony situation aligned, it's hard to find an apartment you can afford, right?
absolutely,
And
absolutely.
then the only thing you got is government subsidized housing at this point. And well, if you're a felon, you don't get that.
Right.
So one of the I'm just going to do a little shameless political plug here too while we're at it. I was so frustrated to see the government spending all kinds of money on other stuff when I've got clients needing housing.
Right.
I got really in my feelings about it, and I had to pray forgiveness over it for the last 14 days, just saying. But
I understand.
the cool thing about targeted case managers is Okay, so if I am talking to these different developers or real estate people on the regular basis, like daily, guess who's going to be the first one to know when something comes open? You know, when they've got an apartment coming open in 5 days, or they've got 3 houses sitting somewhere they need to finish doing whatever to before they get them rented, right? If
Right.
I'm talking to these people daily as a part of my job, I'm the first one that's going to find out. And that's where targeted case managers come in. A really good targeted case manager is all about networking. They will have people everywhere, have no shame in calling somebody and being like, hey, I got somebody, I need this, I need that. And the best part about it is that when you're coming out of prison or out of treatment and your life is in shambles and you got wreckage for days, you really don't. One, I was really struggling with the fact of asking for help because I didn't feel like I deserved it, for one.
Right.
And then two, I didn't know who to call. I mean, a lot of stuff had changed over a 2 year period. I mean, I didn't understand technology. I mean, it had advanced that much, you know, and so having somebody that is plugged into these different areas in targeted case management is absolutely a resource that you want, not just for, you know, because that's how their brain is trained. They're constantly looking at these jobs and these industry coming in and these different housing opportunities coming up. They know about like HUD grant qualities and stuff like that, where you can see about getting in through HUD in bigger areas like, you know, Bowling Green, Kentucky, or, you know, places like that.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the smaller towns, they are plugged into the private landlord sector, where, you know, you've got private landlords that are a little bit more felon friendly depending on the situation, you know, because these bigger companies, you go in as a felon and they do a background check and they're just going to look at the paper. They're not going to look at the person. Well, I'm
Right.
a whole person. I'm not the same person as I was when I caught that charge, you know, a whole different person. And so these private landlords, you know, there's one here in Franklin, Kentucky that, you know, she offered me an apartment and I was just like, started crying. I was like, I didn't think I was ever going to get my own place to live until I could buy one, you know, and even then you kind of got to worry about that because the banks may not want to pay.
Right.
So, you know, but it was, you know, there are resources out there, and that's kind of where that targeted case manager being plugged in. But as somebody coming out in a reentry situation, you know, that therapist, and then you, in the same office, you've got a targeted case manager. So they're kind of going back and forth about what you need and how you need it. And targeted case manager is really good with budgeting, you know, helping you figure out your financial resources. Tax stuff, that was confusing when I come out. The targeted case manager kind of helped me navigate that. Here recently, the stimulus stuff, that's a little confusing for some folks, especially ones that are coming out. You know, how do I get a stimulus? I was incarcerated. How does that work? And so the targeted case manager, a good one, knows these things and can help you navigate through that. And if they don't know, they can find out for you because that's just what their position is to do, you know?
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there was probably some things that was required of you that you found a little bit challenging. And and so was there ever a time when you wanted to play that victim card, or that this is not fair card, or this is just too hard? And I'm sure you did, but if you did, what did you do to combat that? How did you get over that overwhelmingness?
Well, when I came out, okay, so we go into court on I come out on December 30th. We go into court on January 10th. The spiritual side of it for me was huge. And having no expectations, you know, it goes back to kind of like I was talking about with the best interest of the kids being in mind, right? Well, in order to do that, I had to look at my role as a mom in each of my kids' lives, right? Well, Jace being 14 years old, it would be irresponsible of me to come in and demand my 50-50 time with him or my child back when he's 14. For one, he's settled in a school district that I do not live in, and he's happy where he's at. And so my role as his mother is the every other weekend mom, except for when he's out of school in the summers, and then he's at my house probably more than he wants to be there. But he, that idea of not being the everyday mom was really hard for me to swallow my pride on. But that's what it boiled back to, is my pride. I thought, yes, there's been some injustice done in my situation back in that helped spiral me. But I may not have been responsible wholly for that situation. I take accountability for my part. Now, don't get me wrong, it was plenty me. But it's my responsibility to look at what I have to work with and to grow from it. Now, with my daughters, that situation was a little bit different. My ex-husband was struggling at the time. And, there was some concern there about the best interest of my kids. The girls are 10, they're twins. And even though they had been with him for a couple of years, the way we integrated it back was really responsible. So we go to court on January 10th, and come to find out they had not started reunification therapy as was told to the court, right? So the judge ordered that reunification therapy start within 14 days. So a therapist was picked, and on January 21st, we start reunification therapy. At that time, it was moving because the court was pushing it to move in a certain way to keep delay down from either side. And so it was moving. Well, eventually, a couple of months later, COVID decides to hit, and it's like, we're running in a great progression here. I mean, by the time COVID kind of hit, they started doing the mandates and stuff. I was already doing a supervised visitation 2 hours a week and fixing to go to unsupervised. And then COVID hits, and the court has to postpone the March 31st date. And I was like, I'm working so hard, and the COVID has happened to do this to me. Like the whole world is having COVID just because they didn't want me to go to court. I mean,
right.
And you get these, but the thing to remember is that it's all about focus. It's all about staying focused on exactly what's in front of you, taking care of that situation, looking at our serenity in it. What can I change? And if I can't change anything, then obviously it's God's will and nothing for me to change to begin with, right? Just like, if God wants me to change the laws up in the White House, then he's going to put me in a position to do that, right? Until then, I can't worry about him right this second. And so we have to look at, child custody and going through these processes like that. There were plenty of times that, due to the delays, not once. Now, at one point, we had 3 other attorneys involved in this because my mom was also involved and had an attorney from where she was trying to get, while I was incarcerated, my timeshare so that they could see the kids. So at one time, we had me, pro se, as my own attorney, and I've been pro se through this whole situation, which I do want to talk about that in just a second. I don't necessarily suggest it, but it is doable. And 3 other attorneys, and there were several times where we would have to make a delay because an attorney had not filed something appropriately or within a certain time frame due to policies and procedures. And granted, I'm the only non-attorney. That didn't happen at all. Just saying, but I joke, but at the end of the day, we had, there's these several delays, especially in highly contested cases, which mine was. There's 4,500 pages in my custody file. Pages. It's insane. The clerk's office, you call down there and you say my last name and they're like, oh gosh. So there's many times but it goes back to those positive supports. My church family has been absolutely amazing. My work family has been absolutely amazing. I do work in the recovery field. I work in a treatment facility. I work in an office setting, and it has been absolutely amazing how they have all encouraged me when I knew I was getting frustrated and I was getting down and I was starting to doubt that I could ever do it. I would get like some random call from somebody I hadn't talked to in 2 weeks saying, "Hey, just wanted to let you know I'm proud of you." And I'm like, "What?" I needed that today, man. And those are the ways that we combat it. But it all goes back to our supports, like as an APSS, my clients know that if that balance starts shifting a little bit, pick up that 5,000 pound phone and call somebody.
Right.
Call me. We'll look at the situation from a realistic view because, sometimes like in my addict mind, I'll get that all or none thinking. And I'll think just because a court date got delayed or I didn't get the exact answer I wanted, that I might as well give up and go back to Texas and get high. Like our addict brain does that sometimes, and we can't let that happen. We have to stay focused on the task at hand.
Right. Right. So let's talk about, okay, so I keep going back to, I know it wasn't a linear path for you, but I keep going back. Okay. So you hired the friend of the court for the best interest of the child. You've got supports in your corner. You've got targeted case management. You've got all these things going for you. And you've petitioned the court, you're going through the process of getting custody back, you're going through court hearings, you're going through all of that, all those steps, which we can all wrap our head around because, this sounds like pretty much everybody's story up until this point. But now let's talk about, an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So you're representing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why you're a rock star and a superhero in my book. And that's wonderful. And absolutely, if anybody is out there and they have the ability to do that, of course, nobody's going to look out for you like you're going to look out for you. And but see, you and me are not the same because there's no way I could do that. And self-sabotage. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So
you could.
So let's talk about an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So if you were not able, what would you suggest to someone when it comes to finding an attorney or hiring an attorney or having the ability to retain an attorney if someone wasn't able to represent themselves, or how would someone might go about representing themselves?
Well, it is a very sticky situation. Necessity breeds invention. I mean, that was like the story of my life in jail. It's the story of my life going through this situation. While I was incarcerated, my mom and her attorney, like I said, were going after trying to get my children for the time that I should be getting them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the groundwork was already laid. Now, when I come out, I didn't have any money. I don't, my family are working class people. They don't have extra, money thrown around. And to be honest with you, they had already depleted just about everything they could by the attorney they had while I was incarcerated. And so it put me in a spot to where I had to get creative. I do not necessarily suggest representing yourself pro se, but it is doable. Now, it also depends. I know that this is more of an international platform, so I'm being more specific to Kentucky law at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm being more specific to my district a little bit. Now, in Kentucky, you can represent yourself pro se. The judge in whatever district in the state of Kentucky has the right to deny you. That being said, some judges won't. Some judges are more pro-social and understand that not everybody can afford an attorney and that you can still be a good parent if you can't afford an attorney. Some judges, and I get kind of why they're like that, because it takes a lot of procedure in these cases so that they aren't overturned by the Supreme Court. Okay, so if I go in pro se, and I am stalling the process just due to ignorance of procedure, then this judge it's going to take a case that should take 2 days, 8 months in court, and then we're all in a mess still anyway because it's not procedurally been able to be handled right.
Right.
I happened to have a judge that was pro-social. I happened to do enough research, and it took, what would take an attorney a motion to write up 30 minutes at the beginning took me about 8 hours because I had to go back on old motions that I had seen. And then I had to look at the current situation. I had to compare it to what custodial, situation we were dealing with, whether it was a motion for contempt or a motion for custody, a motion for records production, interrogatories. These are all different things that are a part of that procedure, and I had to apply it.
And all of this is on top of all of your obligations.
Oh yeah,
in addition,
at one point, I think I figured, in Kentucky, we do an MRT program. I don't know if you're familiar with it, through probation and parole. And it's where you go through like these 12 steps in this MRT program. They do it in the jails all the time. And they had me break down the time that I spent of doing everything that I do in my 168 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And it was 30 hours of legal research at one point, just research. But it is doable. One thing in Kentucky, the statute for custodial issues, when you're looking at best interest standards, is 403.270. It's KRS 403.270. And that'll kind of break down the best interest standards of what the court expects when they're making a determination. So like it looks at the mental health of the child, the mental health of the parents, the financial ability of the parents to provide, their work schedules, what the child's needs are, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And so when I broke those down and I compared my situation, even with my incarceration and my treatment, along with my ex-husband's and his living situation and what was going on in his life at the time, it was absolutely doable for me to petition the court for custody of my kids. Part of that was what was going on with my ex-husband at the time. Now, I went ahead and did all of my stuff pro se. My judge was very understanding of the fact it was extremely hard. I had to do all of my own questioning. There was 16 professionals that I subpoenaed and put on the stand. Cops, which that was really weird, walking into the sheriff's department 6 days out of prison. I'm not going to lie. I had to do the whole... like, I was done with handcuffs and I'm walking in the sheriff's department. What is that? But, I did it. It was a growing thing for me. And, but, we had a lot of mental health professionals that I had to put on the stand. I had to do research as far as, why they would put something in a certain record. We had EMTs put on the stand. I had my ex-husband on the stand, and that was a little weird too. I'm not going to lie. Not many people get to put their ex-husband on the stand and really kind of grill him a little bit, And of course, one thing I can toot my own horn on is I did handle that situation with grace and integrity. I in no way tried to be mean or petty or vindictive, because at the end of the day, I just wanted the best interest of my kids. It wasn't about getting back at him. It really wasn't. I'd forgiven him a long time ago for his side of the street and our stuff, and I'd asked for forgiveness for mine. And so I went into it with a clear mind, and that's really important. So there's a lot to that when you're doing these things pro se, and it is a very hard thing to navigate. You have to ask a lot of questions. Sometimes you won't get answers. Instead, you'll get I can't give you legal advice. Maybe you should go get an attorney, which kind of just fueled me to do a little bit more research, because I don't like somebody telling me I don't know something. And now with one cool thing about a reentry program is you do get some access to legal aid. Legal aid can help in some of these situations at either a free or reduced rate. You do have the opportunity to go through Department or DCBS and open up your own case, where DCBS will monitor you being integrated back into your children's lives. Um, I'm not crazy about that for the main reason of right now, child services is overloaded as it is. And so you would be better in going into a therapeutic setting, which, if you're coming out of prison, Medicare is going to cover anyway. So, you would be better to go into that kind of setting rather than DCBS overseeing the reintegration of your family. And then as far as an attorney, one thing that I highly suggest about an attorney is when you talk to several, one, do not just take the first person that was suggested to you or referred to you, because attorneys are kind of like romantic partners. You really got to kind of get to know them a little bit, and you really have to click with them in order for this to work. I'm kind of a bull in a china shop sometimes, like I know that this is going to be useful and I'm going to need you to use it, and some attorneys don't like that. Some attorneys, even some of the attorneys that were involved in my case, if I felt strongly about something, I would plant my feet and say, no, this is important, and they didn't necessarily like that, because they went and spent all this money at law school. And here's somebody with, not even a bachelor's telling them what she wants done, and thinking I know more than they do, which is part of my problem to begin with. But, sometimes that can be an issue, right? And so when you go in and you meet with these attorneys, one suggestion I have is if you can't sit and tell them your deepest, darkest, dirtiest skeleton in the closet, you don't need them, period. Because your attorney cannot adequately navigate through some of the give and take of these cases without you knowing everything. The minute that you start hiding things from them, or say a situation happens between me and my ex-husband, and his perception of it is this, and my perception of it is that, but he has maybe been dishonest in the past and not told the whole story to his attorney, that's a problem, for her, for the attorney, because then she can't adequately defend what he's trying to say, right? Or vice versa. Same with me if I had an attorney. And so it's important that you be able to sit and say, look, Mr. Bill, I did this and I did that, and I know this, and I told him that, and I know it wasn't appropriate, but this is the reason why I did it, whatever the case. Another thing too, when you're talking about attorneys, especially in contested child custody cases, make sure they know about parental alienation in these cases. Parental alienation is actually considered under the neglect standard of child custody. One parent not allowing another parent access to a child in a safe environment is neglect. So an attorney that is good with parental alienation and well-versed in that is really, really, really important. Also, an attorney that is not necessarily worried about a stigma. One cool thing about me coming back is I was able to come to work in the recovery field. So I have a sustained, I have plenty of people I can call and say, hey, did you see me at a meeting last week? Can you tell this person that? And so your attorney needs to be able to trust you and go back and forth with you to get information. I have 190 pages of text messages since January 1st of 2020 between me and my ex-husband. I print them off periodically. I know that sounds really creepy and probably overdone, overachiever in that area. But it has been invaluable because I've never deleted a text message between him and I was able to hand that over to the court and say, you tell me if I've acted inappropriately. and I'll adjust my temperament either way.
Right.
And there's been suggestions made of me of the other attorneys. I've tried to cooperate with those as much as possible. There were times that I did have to bite my tongue. There were times that I was told that another person in my ex-husband's life was a big part of my kids' lives, and it hurt my pride. But I had to do it as it suggested of me and work with that person. And then on my recovery end, I ended up getting suggested to me by my sponsor that I have to pray for her for 21 days and pray abundance over her life. And I did. And guess what? I actually like the girl today.
You know, you can't hate somebody you pray for.
I can't.
Right?
You can't. You really can't. And so,
It works.
it does. It really does. And, I pray abundance over my ex-husband and his girlfriend and their whole house every single day. And I've done this for months. And so now when he does something that I feel like is inappropriate, like I'll give you an example. Today, he made an appointment a medical appointment for one of my children and I'm the only one that's supposed to be taking them to medical appointments. So that means he made an appointment blindly on my day that I'm going to have to adjust around. And I already had clients scheduled for that time and that day. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I got really frustrated. The petty side of me could have sat here at my little computer, like that cat meme or whatever, and typed up a whole contempt motion and filed that sucker tomorrow. And you know what? He could go to jail for contempt for making a stinking doctor's appointment. But you know what? That ain't me. It's just not me. So what I did was I got on the phone and I called said client and I said, look, I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to move this around somehow. My kid has an appointment. Is that okay? And I made adjustments to my life without resentment, all because I do take the time to try to work with him. Another suggestion I have real quick while I'm thinking about it is, would you rather be right or would you rather be happy? That pride will ruin your whole life if you allow it. In these types of situations, your pride can ruin your kids' lives. Another aspect other than an attorney is something that's becoming more popular is mediation. Okay. So say you come out of prison and, you're wanting to do, 50-50 with your ex. I come out of prison and I look at my life and I have adequate housing, without stress, because if you've got adequate housing, but you can't pay your bills, that's an issue. You have to be realistic about the situation. I've got a job that, I can still take care of my kids around everything. I'm active in my recovery and I can still care for my kids when I'm doing all this other stuff, dealing with parole, because they really like to sniff you every day when you get out. They want you in there and they want to look at you and make sure you're not doing nothing dumb, which is fine. I have nothing but love for the parole office locally. They've been really respectful of me. They've been really understanding with me. They don't hassle me at all. But my address has been the same for the past 14 months. My job has been the same for the past 14 months. Nothing changes, and they're okay with that. But this mediation, you can go into this mediation and say you have all these external stressors under control and you yourself are in a stable environment and you want to get 50-50 custody of your child and your partner or ex or whatever, and you aren't quite sure what that should look like. Because there's all kinds of ways it could look, with this 50-50. It could be like 7 days on, 7 days off. It could be a 2-2-3, which is what we did for 6 months. After I'd been out for 6 months, the judge ordered me 50-50 custody of my kids. We ended up doing a 2-2-3 schedule because of some external factors at their dad's house. It was just better that they have different environments every couple of days, right? Mm-hmm. And so I don't necessarily suggest that uh, if you can keep from it, but because it's a lot of back and forth,
Right.
especially when you're trying to figure out doctor's appointments and all of this other stuff. It's a lot of back and forth. And so there's so many different ways at 50-50. It could be one of you have them Monday through Thursday and the other one have them Thursday through Sunday, depending on your work schedule. So there's a lot of different areas that you can go into. And a mediator can help you navigate some of those because, again, pride gets in the way and we don't want to give this give or take, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the important part, though, is at the end of the day, both sides need to understand that it ain't about you. It's not about you. It's not about what you want. It's about the reality of your own situation, your own foundation, and it's about the reality of what those kids need. And if you have to start adjusting your idea of what a mom or a dad is coming out of prison in order to be effective in those kids' lives, then that's just what you have to do. I am the parent in my kids' life, my daughter's lives every day. I take care of making sure they get their homework. I take care of making sure they get to their doctor's appointments. Like that's my idea of a mom, right?
Right.
But with my 14-year-old, my idea of a mom is a little bit different. And guess what? He is still so well adjusted for it. I've had so many people, even in my ex-husband's family, come and say, man, he has just blossomed over the past 6 or 8 months. Well, guess what? I've only been back for 14 months. So it's got to be because of me, right? No, not really. But we have been able to really communicate, like I haven't even taken my 14-year-old's dad back to court. I've not even changed the custody arrangements, the timeshare arrangements, none of that, because we communicate and work together outside the court system. And that's possible. It is very much possible and very much in the best interest of, our child. As far as the mediation goes, though, you're probably looking at about $1,000 for a day because attorneys are the only ones that do them. And what they do is they go and they put you in one room and the other in the other room, and then they go back and forth until they come to some kind of common conclusion. Well, me, I'm just too cheap to pay somebody to do that. So, I started kind of doing it on my own and was like, hey, how about this? You know what I mean? Which we ended up not being able to use a mediator. We ended up going into full-blown 6 full days of court over several months because of COVID. I went pro se the entire time. My mom, which was also involved in part of the case, not all of it, but part of it, ended up not having an attorney after March. And so she actually went pro se. And then we were actually going against one of the biggest law firms in Bowling Green, Kentucky. I'm not going to really say. But that being said, it was an education that is invaluable. I mean, absolutely invaluable. I learned so much. I hate that I had to learn it that way, because it wasn't my intention. If the world is all sunshine and rainbows, then, we all get along and we all put, the right foot forward and do the next right thing. But, sometimes our pride gets in the way of that.
Right. So, okay. So I just can't drag it out any longer. So you went to court and you represented yourself, and it took longer than what you thought it was going to take, but you were tenacious. You didn't give up. You did whatever it took. You adapted, you overcame. And so, if I'm not mistaken, we talked for just a minute this morning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so after we talked this morning, you got some really, really awesome news, didn't you?
Yes. So so you and I talked about this about a month ago, because you have seen my, this is the trials and the suffering that this has been, and it's been very stressful. And of course I can't even, it would take us an 8-hour webcast to go through the reasons and concern behind the stress, right?
Right.
And so we talked about this about a month ago of doing this webcast and just kind of giving people some ideas of what they can and can't do and that kind of thing. And I thought, okay, well, when we set the date, it was like, yeah, okay, well, the court thing will be done by then and we'll have the order back way before then. So, we'll know because, COVID has delayed everything in the court system. So we found out this morning that my daughters are actually, we still have joint custody. We still have joint decision making and everything, but I was awarded custodial parent this morning. Yeah. And, it's surreal. I mean, it's like, it's kind of like, I don't even know. I don't think it's really hit me yet, I would have been okay with doing the 50-50. I really would have been fine if that verdict would have come down only for the reason that if that was the verdict that come down, that was God's will and I would have had acceptance in it.
Right.
I probably still would have worried a lot. Again, this whole situation has been out of necessity. I've had acceptance with the situation with Jace, but it was really hard for me to have some acceptance in my girl's situation because of the difference in the households, at their dads. And so I don't know. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I mean, it was like, now what? You know what I mean? Like, now what do I do? And so I'm sitting down this morning after, we're talking and I'm like, okay. And I'm like, I'm sitting here talking to you and I'm like looking over here because my mom's got the screen pulled up with the email that we had been waiting on. And it come on a minute I talked to you and I was like, oh, there it is, And, but I feel like the judge handled it so appropriately. Of course, it's like 13 pages long. And they go through, when they do an order like that, they go through the different areas of proof. And so, it'll state that, Nicole was incarcerated from such and such to such and such, the father this, Nicole that, the children have a loving relationship with both parents. Talked about my recovery in there, talked about, the things that had been going on with my ex-husband. And it was just a kind of an all-encompassing, bullet point of what's went on over 6 days of testimony, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the judge did a really good job, I feel like, of not making it so substantial. Now, that's easy, I guess, for me to say because it moved the time my way.
Right.
But the way they did it was they looked at his work schedule and they looked at my work schedule, and it's going to be both of us getting a lot of quantity time with the kids, and I think that's the biggest important part, is I'm the one that takes care of their medical needs. So, therapy on 2 kids, they have a mentor through the program up at, Angel Arms. They've got targeted case management. So like they get all the services I get, which is awesome, And so when you add that in and, we go to a chiropractor, both of them in braces. One of them's done broke a retainer this week. Second retainer we bought to as many weeks, and when you look at all these appointments, that's like 6 or 7 hours a week of appointments, and that's not counting. They're starting softball for the first time ever because they weren't really given the opportunity to do any activities while I was gone.
Right.
And so we're reintegrating all of these things. And then I work a full-time job, then some. My employer has been great about working around my kids' needs and their schedule. I've been very fortunate in that. Not all employers are like that. And I'm very grateful for that. But when you look at the all-encompassing of it, the judge did a good job of giving my ex-husband, some quantity time with my kids, me some quantity time with my kids. And then we've got like that roughage of, scattling here, there, and everywhere in the middle. And I think that's the most important part of any kind of custody arrangement is, you know, granted we're human, you know, we're parents, we're men and women, you know, we need to take care of ourselves and care for ourselves, but at the end of the day it's all about them in my eyes.
Right.
You know, I do try to take care of myself as much as I can. I'm really kind of bad at self-care, but I'm working on it. But my focus has been on them and making sure that their needs are met. And as long as my focus has maintained there, the court system has seen that. If they asked me to stand on my head and gargle peanut butter, which they didn't, thank goodness, because that probably would have killed me. But I would have done it. You know what I mean? Like I would have done it. You know, they said something about a drug test, and I pulled out my little work bag where I got drug tested in my work bag, and I'm like, here, pick one. You know, whatever you need. You know,
Yeah.
but it boils back to staying within what you know is going to keep you healthy for your recovery. When we're talking about our if our recovery stays intact, the promises do come true. That is so true. We make it so much harder because when we come out of incarceration or we come out of treatment, we're trying to fix 99 problems when we need to just focus on one, and that's
Right.
us. You know what I mean? The rest of it will fall into place. And I didn't get that the first go around. I come out gangbusters out of Rivendell thinking, okay, I got to fix this. I got to fix this. I got to fix this. And guess what? I was high within 3 months.
Right.
I mean, high. And we just, that's where I screwed up the first time. You know what I mean? And the second time, even though it was, I don't think people quite understand when you come out of being incarcerated for that long, you know, like a bath is weird.
Yeah.
You know, like going and shopping for shampoo freaked me out a little bit because I'm like, there's so many choices, you know. In commissary, I had two. I had two choices on my store. You know?
We had that conversation. My first time grocery shopping, I had money and I needed to buy groceries and just yeah. I get that wholeheartedly.
And depending on where your madness was, walking out of Walmart with a receipt in your groceries was kind of weird, you know. Like I'm not even gonna lie, you know. And so there's all these underlying things, and I think where people really screw up is they don't put their pride aside and say, okay, I need some help. Yeah. You know, I had a sponsor right out the gate. I called her more than she liked at first. Now I call her and she's like, if it's my number on the other end, she's like, are you dead? Are you okay? Because I probably should call her more. But, you know, a sponsor right out the gate, a home group in whatever recovery program you're in, right out the gate, getting a plethora of numbers right out the gate in whatever support group you're in, you know, whether it's whichever one. I go to all of them because I figure it takes a village to raise me. But, you know, the therapist, so that you can really hit the mental health aspect, because let's face it, you know, prison systems are prison systems. They really don't give two craps about what's going on up here. Well, that's a problem. Right. Because, you know, I had all this going on here when I picked up that pill and had the right substance at the right time with the right circumstance, and bam, I'm an addict. Yes. Right. So I got all this stuff going on up here. If you don't address that when you come out of prison with a real therapist that understands and, you know, is going to guide you through that, just like a sponsor guides you through steps, and release some of that trauma, you're going to end up high again. I mean, I just hate to be like that.
Oh, girl, that's a whole nother webcast. What are you talking about? Yes.
I'm telling you. Well, and, you know, in an APSS, you know, most of my cases, which, you know, we were talking a while ago about times when I wanted to give up. There was a few times through all of this that I got to a point and I'm like, God, why? Why is this continuing? This is unacceptable. It's unnecessary. You know what I mean? Like, it's completely unnecessary that I'm still having to file these motions, that I'm still having to fight this, that we are still having these same discussions a year later. Even though I had 50 custody 6 months out, we were still in court up until today,
Right.
really. And there were so many times I was like, God, why is this still going? Well, I want you to know, when I started my job at the recovery center, I started in security, 40 days out of prison, which was really funny because, I was used to being on the other side of the camera.
Yeah, that doesn't happen
Right.
often.
It does not. It does not. But it was absolutely a God thing. It was so much a God thing. And I'm forever grateful because it's a huge part of my recovery story. And I ended up doing that and doing RA, residential advisor type person. Well, we had somebody leave that was an APSS, and it just so happened they were having another class in 2 days. And so I called and I was like, I told my boss, I said, hey, this class is in 2 days. Do you want to send me? I'd like to be an APSS and take that position. And they were like, well, it usually takes 3 or 4 weeks for us to get this approved. And I said, well, how about this? I'm going to go ahead and pay for it. I'm going to take the class. And if you want to use me in that capacity, that's great. If not, that's fine too. But I feel led I need to take this class. and God love them, they figured out how to take me. So I took the class, and become an APSS. And I worked in the treatment facility only for, a while in that capacity, teaching groups. I facilitate some of the trainings that through Mental Health America here in Kentucky. And I love doing that. It's super fun to watch all these new bright faces so excited. And then they offered me to start taking some office clients, which is a whole other breed, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you what, the first 3 clients I got, and of course, I'm not going to put their business out there, but all of them had the same kind of factors. They were all moms. They were all facing incarceration or had some kind of drug situation going on. They had all had their children either taken or at risk of being taken. They were all dealing with DCBS or in a custody case, every one of them. And it was that day that I looked back and I was like, thank you, God.
Yeah.
And sorry, I'm getting teary eyed, but it was all worth it because now I have the ability to help guide some of these women and hopefully, not in all cases, steer them clear of some of the potholes that Amy made me cry. That I hit, you know what I mean? And so it all comes full circle. Even with this legal stuff, now when clients call, I'm not an attorney. I probably should have led with that. I'm definitely not an attorney. I cannot give legal or mental health advice because I'm not a therapist. But this is what has implemented, an active change in my life for my family through all of this. These are the things that I've learned that where there's a will, there's a way. And even though it wasn't necessarily the most graceful way, and there were several nights that I sat up drinking coffee and crying, thinking I'm never going to be able to write this 25-page motion. And I did. But it's just like in our recovery, every trial that comes at us, and when I say trial, I don't mean legal trial. I mean like stepping stone, not stumbling block, but everything that kind of gets in our way a little bit, if we pause, process, pray, and proceed, and we navigate that well, guess what that does? That elevates our confidence so that we can move forward to the next trial and then the next trial and the next trial. So now I was so nervous the first day that we went into court because my ex-husband was the first person I was putting on the stand. I was nervous. I was more than nervous. I was sick. I ain't even gonna lie. I woke up at 4:30 that morning, sit and prayed for about an hour and a half, scared to death, and I got up there and I just went down. I was prepared. I went down my list of questions with grace and integrity, and it wasn't that bad. And so the next time I was faced with something, and the next time I was faced in something, or the next time I hit a place where I could advocate, um, for this, there was a time when I was in child support court, and that judge put in a child support order that that I had substance use issues. And that just didn't sit well with me because that was inappropriate. There was no reason for substance use issues to be in a child support order. It has nothing to do with finances, right?
Right, right.
And I was offended. I mean, I was offended. So I wrote myself an alter, amend, or vacate on that order from the judge, and I filed it, asking her to vacate that order, basically, which means to overturn it. And in that order, the last sentence I put was, I have worked hard to overcome the person that I once was, and I feel it inappropriate that this states this in this order. And I would appreciate it if the judge could rewrite said order so that that's not in there. And then I put ... We do recover in big letters. And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching her, and she's reading it, and she's on the bench reading it, right? And she's like, oh, okay. Doing all of this has given me the confidence to stand up and say, I did these awful things. I did things that were out my character and that I was not raised to do or whatnot. But I've changed.
Right.
If you're going off the old me, you're getting old data, friend, because I'm a different person today. And I think we have to get to a point, especially when it comes to fighting for our kids, that we have to show sustained change, and we have to be patient in that. And there are times where you're going to be frustrated because, part of the visitation agreement is for you to call your children every day at 7:00, and you call and the other person on the other end don't let them talk. There's going to be times like that that's going to come up, and you're going to want to drive out to said road and give them the business, right? But you can't do that. You have to get a journal, and you have to log every time you call your child and what you talked about. And you have to log every time you called your child and nobody would answer the phone. And you have to have this. That way, when you go to court, or if you have an attorney, this is grand stuff for an attorney to get from you. Hand it to your attorney and say, this is my journal of when I've talked to my kids and about what. And when I was not allowed to talk to them on the time that is allotted through the order. And the attorney can use these things, or you can use these things to show that you have had integrity and consistency, and you're doing what you say you will do. Because at the end of the day, that's all our kids want, is to know that when we tell them we're going to show up, that we're going to show up at a certain time, and we're going to be there if this situation goes down, and we're not going to be high. Whether your kids were involved in your madness, whether you hid it perfectly from them. A lot of us think we hid it perfectly from our kids. Well, I'm just going to be honest. Most of us didn't.
Most of us didn't. Right. Right.
Most of us didn't.
Right.
In one way or another. I mean, you didn't have to be doing it right in front of them for them to know something was off with mommy or daddy,
Right.
And so, we have to be really realistic that our kids just want to know that they're the center of our world. They want to know that they come first, and their kids, they do come first. They want to know that, when mommy says that she's going to be there at 3:00 to pick me up at school, she's going to be there at 2:55 with bells on and ready to go to appointments, and making sure that my appointments are made, and making sure that I mind. And that's really hard when you're coming out and you're trying to navigate all this other plethora of craziness, parole, working,
Right.
1 or 2 jobs to financially get it, and all these appointments and stuff. It's really hard to navigate, which is where your supports are so important.
Well, hey, it's been awesome. I love hearing your story, and it's such an inspiration. It is. And just to see how you have taken all your experiences and how you apply that to help advocate change in the lives of others now is just absolutely beautiful. I love it. I love you.
I love you too.
So hey, we got the first one under our belt.
We did. We did. I'm excited.
The first of many. So
that's right.
Hey, 6 months from now we'll have all kinds, and like you said, with experience comes knowledge. And so, anyway, something I want to do is make sure that we pray out of these webcasts. So,
Absolutely.
if you pray with me real quick, I'll
Absolutely.
let you get on about your rest of your night. I love you.
I love you too, and thank you for having me. I love the fact that you are so passionate about breaking the stigma and advocating for change. I mean, I love that. Because if we don't, then who's going to do it for our people?
Amen. What you just said. Hey,
Yeah.
let's pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, again, thank you, God, for this powerful testimony tonight, Lord.
Thank you, Lord.
Lord, I ask that you just, anybody that is within the sound of our words, whether it be tonight or if it's in the future, just whenever it is, God, that those words would fall on the ears of who needs to hear it, God. Let the knowledge that's been shared here tonight sow seeds and just let life change come of it, Lord. We ask that your spirit just dwell in everything that comes from this webcast tonight, Lord, because we know without you in it, none of it really matters anyway. God, we thank you and we praise you. It's in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Love
Hey,
it.
I love you, sis.
I love you too. I'm so proud of you.
Oh, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. And we're going to do this again soon.
Absolutely.
All
Anytime.
right. Bye.
Bye.